So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is we come from the same generation, Gen X, and we have seen a lot of changes in the media space. We've seen media, technology, and we came up during a time where work ethic and workplace practices were very different.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your experiences of how you got started and really what that was like.
Oh my goodness. We're going way back.
We're going back.
So it's funny. So we went to the same university and my major was communications and public relations. And I would do internships and I was like, this is not for me. I just don't want to sit behind a desk all day and write press releases.
Right.
So I had this like in my gut. I was like, I want to work in television. And I didn't know why, but I knew it was like, it was a calling. And it's the craziest way that I got my first job. So I had never taken a film or a TV class. And I told someone that I really wanted to work in television. And this person had a connection with someone at 48 Hours. So I went for an interview. It went well. There was an AP position. I didn't even know what an AP was at the time, associate producer. So I had this interview and I was walking up from CBS and I passed the Sally Jessy Raphael Show. And I walk by and I remember my mom had recently seen a psychic who said, your daughter's gonna work at a talk show. And so that was sort of planted in my brain. And I passed the Sally Jessy Raphael Show. And I remember, your daughter's gonna work at a talk show. So I turn around, I walk into the Sally Jessy Raphael Show. I befriend this security guard and I'm like, hi, how are you? You know, who do I get my resume to if I want a job at the Sally Show? And he's like, don't worry, I got you. So I left my resume, I wrote a note, you know, to the executive producer. And about an hour and a half later, I'm at work. I was working for my father at the time. And I get a call from the executive producer. And she's like, I loved your note. I love your chutzpah that you just walked in and left a resume. I'd love to meet you. And I like literally fell to the floor. I'm like, how is this even possible? But I had such a good feeling. So I walk in and I meet my first boss and mentor, Amy Rosenblum, who you know.
The legendary Amy Rosenblum.
The legendary Amy. And we're the same exact height. We have the same color hair. It's like we're looking in the mirror at each other. And she's like, oh my God, I love you already. And like I didn't even open my mouth. So I come in and we sit down and we're talking. And, you know, and she's like, I think you'd be great. She doesn't know anything about me. But she just, you know, we sort of like had a good rapport. And, you know, at the time, it was so important to have good communication. I mean, it still is, but I really had worked on my communication skills and I learned a lot in college on how to establish a rapport and what people wanted to hear on an interview, which kids are certainly lacking these days. But so she and I are, you know, we're talking, we hit it off and she says, listen, you have zero experience. She says, I'm gonna hire you and I'm gonna throw you right into an associate producer position. We're gonna skip the PA position because I need an AP at the time. So I jump in. She says, don't tell anyone you have no experience. We're going to lie. We're going to lie to my whole team.
Amy.
So I jump right in. I have no clue what I'm doing. I had to learn really quickly. I had an amazing producer that I worked with, and I loved it, you know, and I picked it up really quickly. But then the reality of what's involved in TV production hits. I'm working 16-hour days. I'm at work at 6 a.m. because we'd have shows 3 days a week and I would have to prepare and prep the guests and be there for a wardrobe. And I'm working till 10:30 at night. But it was, I will say, so I was an AP, then a PA because that associate producer came in.
Okay.
Then I worked my way up pretty quickly. And after a year, I was producing. I was 23, and I was the youngest producer on the show. And so I was terrified to go in and talk to Sally. She was so intimidating, right? And she was a toughie. So I would go in and brief her, literally shaking, you know? And she she wanted to be Barbara Walters, let's be honest, but she was a talk show host.
Yeah.
So I'd go in and she'd be smoking a cigarette and she'd look at me and she'd be like, throw my pre-interviews back at me. And she'd go, this is shit. And she'd be smoking a cigarette, blowing it in my face. And she's like, what is this? Oversexed teens. What is this? I'm cheating on my... And I'm like, this is the stuff that rates. But like, it wasn't my job to say it. Anyway, long story short, one of my producers was like, Nikki, if you want to make it in this business, you need thick skin, okay? You got to develop thick skin. And so it took me some time, but I did. And I was not intimidated by her anymore. And I really learned so much. And it was the greatest training ground for reality television. It was like the first foray into reality television, really, at the time.
So just, if you want to just walk me through, like, you really had an incredible run at one of the most popular shows ever globally, that everyone knows it when I say it, right? So tell me about that.
Say Yes to the Dress. Now, I probably was the only person who never watched the show. It's good to produce something that you've never seen before, because you don't have a formula in your mind of how it's done. You can come at it with fresh eyes and really say, okay, so this is the show, but here's how I can see it evolving. Here's how I feel like we could do things a little bit better. And being that the show, when I came onto it, had already been in existence for 8 seasons. So it was running, I want to say, about 4 years, not even 3 or 4 years. I was so excited to be a part of this, this world-wide hit. We're in 165 countries. It was incredible. But I came in and it was really difficult. The show had been run by one showrunner for 4 years. And the client, TLC, sort of going head to head with this showrunner. And the client at TLC I had worked with previously. And the client suggested to the owner of the company, why don't you reach out to Nikki? Why don't you see what she's up to? And so that's sort of how I got in. But I changed the show. This sort of the essence of the show always remained. It's really not so much about dresses. That's sort of we would call the show, it would be dress porn, right? And that was the home or the platform in which we would really do a study of human dynamics and relationships and the drama around these very critical times in people's lives. For me, coming into a place where the show has been in existence, they had the same showrunner, things were done a certain way, and it was primarily the crew, they were men. And so to have a woman walking in, a petite woman, with a big voice and ideas that may have been out of the box, was not well received. Really was not well received. And it took me, I'd say, about a year to get people to kind of come around and understand how and why I felt we could improve the show. And there was a lot of resistance, really, and even with the talent, even with Randy. I mean, he was used to doing things a certain way, and I felt we could really improve the show. So, it was really a test for me. I got that lizard skin, that thick skin, and I really had to strengthen it even as the years went on. And eventually we really kind of revamped the show and the ratings improved. And every year I had to do something different and reinvent the wheel and keep the client happy. And it was a challenge. It was a definite challenge, but it gave me, I really learned a lot. I learned a lot in human dynamics. I learned a lot in terms of how to manage, how to lead.
So I just asked about these experiences because one, the Sally Jessy Raphael Show, which for many people who might be watching this weren't even alive then, but it was crazy.
Sally?
It was just the beginning of it was pre-Maury,
Yes.
right? So it was setting the stage for real drama and, tussle TV, as I call it.
Yes.
It was the furthest thing for Barbara Walters you could get, but it was a
Furthest.
gig, and this is where we were with TV and society then. But you also worked with legends in the industry, and you learned a lot. Then you go into Say Yes to the Dress, which you had to use your communication skills, and you had to learn how to persuade people. So the one thing I've always known about you, and by the way, I know all of these experiences shaped you, but I also think you were born this way in a lot of ways, right? Like, this is your demeanor. It just brings me to what you've pivoted to now, and you've done it at a time where a lot of women find themselves having to pivot.
It's like you said, I was born a certain way, and I always felt that it was my job to help people and to fix people's problems.
Right.
And that, without getting into my whole childhood, it was just, I felt like that was where my self-esteem came from. If I could help someone else, if I could fix someone else's problems, then I was worthy. My life, I had a purpose. That was sort of my purpose. And as I grew, I realized I have no control over anyone else's life. I can't fix someone else's life. I can't help everybody.
Right.
People have to help themselves. So yes, innately, that is who I am. My TV experience afforded me an opportunity to meet so many people from around the world. And the one thing that I found that all of these people had in common was a need to be understood and a need to feel heard and, validated. And I think that for me, doing hundreds, probably thousands of interviews over the course of 30 years, I always wanted to advise and to help. It just was like who I am.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, because it wasn't my job. It wasn't my place. It would have been completely inappropriate, right? So I would leave work at the end of the day feeling successful in the show that we were producing, but almost feeling defeated because I saw so many people struggling. I saw so many people, having issues in their relationships. Oh, I forgot to mention, I did a baby story, which was a show where we followed couples and families through a really critical time where they're welcoming a new child into the family, and how that changes the dynamic in relationships and how people struggle. So again, all of these experiences really showed me that life is hard, relationships are hard, and people just have a need to be heard and understood. And so I decided, the TV model was changing, has been changing rapidly. I had done Say Yes to the Dress for, I want to say almost 15 seasons.
That's crazy.
For 12 years. And it was a great experience, but it was time for me to do something different. And having a teenager, and teenagers, my now fiance has 2 children. So I was sort of living through 3 teenage experiences and seeing what these kids were going through. And also my friends who were going through these changes in life, right? Empty nesters, also feeling like they wanted to make career pivots, divorce. I was like, there is such a need, whether you're a teen, whether you're a parent, whether you're a woman trying to, reinvent yourself at a different stage of life, for, people who can encourage and empower and almost teach, right? Like, I feel that my life experience has given me so much wisdom, right? And I want to impart that on not only people I love, but people who need that. So I knew that this was my calling. And I was not prepared to go back to school and become a therapist and spend, 3 or 4 years studying, and, it just wasn't for me. And so the next greatest thing where I felt I could help, and now there's this whole movement of life coaches. And it sounds sort of crazy, like, what is a life coach? What does that even mean, right? But I did some research and I explored various routes of certification and all different programs. And I said, this is my calling. This is my passion. And so I decided to spend a year getting certified and doing, literally stacks of books still surround me, reading every book, watching every YouTube, learning, growing, exploring, going to lectures. And I decided this is it. And so now I throw myself, mind, body, soul, spirit, into my calling, which is to help others become the best versions of themselves.
First of all, I think it's so funny because we met in a psychology class at school.
We did. You have a funny story about that, about the first impression.
You walked into class and there's this beautiful, tiny girl walks in, and I was like, who is that girl? And you sat at the front of the class with your hand up. I was like, oh my God, she's confident, smart, and she puts her hand up.
Or a nerd.
But so I'm not surprised that you went into helping people and that you that this is where you ended up, because I think that you were always inclined to do that. So you are now focused on, I know that you have a hyper focus on teens, but I also feel like you've created a method that I just saw you launch. Do you want to tell me what that method is?
I find that no matter who I'm coaching, and, I've coached a ton of people over the past few years, I've learned that the key issue that I find, whether it's, middle-aged people, young whoever it is a challenge in communication. Whether, we're talking about relationships, parent-teen relationships, couples, work relationships, management, teams, colleagues, friendships, families. There is a challenge when people try to communicate effectively, for many reasons, right? And primarily our egos. Our egos get in the way. And we fight, when we have conflicts, we fight to win, generally. We want to prove our point, right? We want to get our message across. And we have such strong convictions that we're almost not listening to what somebody else has to say. We just want to be heard and understood, right? It goes back to what I've learned from television. Everyone wants to be heard and understood. So we have to learn how to communicate. But what comes with good communication? We don't want to fight. We don't want to have conflict to win. We want to fight or communicate to understand. And I feel like when you fight to win, nobody wins. Everybody loses. Because what you lose is you lose the respect of the other person. You lose the relationship in many ways, right? You lose the trust. You lose the connection. So I came up with this method called the CREATE method. And it's sort of like you can use the method to create connected relationships. And if you don't use the CREATE method, you create disconnect. So what the CREATE method is it's an acronym.
Okay.
And the critical components are what I find essential to create bonds in relationships. So the C is for clarity. You've got to be clear and concise with your message. You've got to really hone in on what's the one message you're trying to convey. Sometimes you bring in too many topics, too many issues, and the message gets lost, right? It's like when we were growing up, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? We would like have to write an essay and keep it concise. It's the same thing when you communicate. Hone in, what's your intention, what's your message, and stick to that. So that's the C for create. R is regulation, emotionally regulate. It's very difficult to do. It takes practice, and I offer a lot of tips and a lot of tools on how to do that. But I feel like it's just always a work in progress. Things get heated, fights escalate, voices raise, we get nowhere. When you can take a breath and you can regulate those emotions within yourself, then you have a much more productive conversation. When things escalate, you're not heard anymore. And calm equals power in a conversation. E is empathy, which for me, I feel like is the most critical piece in any relationship. Without empathy, you're never going to succeed. So empathy, what does that mean? You want to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And you really want to look at things from where they are, where their life experience has taken them, what their traumas have been, why are they feeling the way that they're feeling. And you don't have to agree, right? But in order to understand, you want to really try to empathize. And I could go on. I could do an entire conversation about empathy.
No, I know, but it's like, I mean, I want you to go through what create is, and then I have some questions about it.
So T is timing. I mean, how many times do we approach someone when it's not a good time? I mean,
you need to teach this.
Yes, I will tell you that don't come to me at 10 o'clock at night with a serious conversation.
Yeah.
I am not up for that. And also first thing in the morning. I mean,
right.
You know, I need my coffee. I have to get my shit together.
Yeah.
So really you want to choose the right time. And if it's with a partner, if it's with your child, you know their cycles. You know when it's a good time. If someone's got something on their mind, or they're worried about their kid, or they've got a problem at work and you want to talk serious, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, and we don't like to hold anxiety about difficult conversations. So we want to sometimes just knock it out and get it over with, right? You got to hold the anxiety, and because otherwise you won't have a productive conversation. So that's timing. Timing is essential. And then finally, expression. The way in which you express yourself. So much of how we communicate is body language and is tonality, right? So 10% of how we communicate are the words that we say, the words that we choose. And it is important to choose words wisely, right? 30% of the way in which we communicate is communicated in our tone. Right? If I was like, Amy, you're doing such an amazing job. Amy, you're doing an amazing job. Right? Like it's a very different message. Yeah. It could be sarcastic, it could be, and the remaining 60% is your body language. Are you open? Are you receptive? Is your body turned towards the person? Are you making eye contact? Are you nodding? Are you tilting your head? Right? So these are incredibly important. And this is why communicating face-to-face is so critical. How many times have you communicated over text and completely misread a tone and think someone's annoyed with you? Or, you know, you are emailing and things are miscommunicated. So that's why I say kids especially really need to hone those skills of having conversations face to face.
I think you've really hit on, well, first of all, I think you've hit on a lot of different things. The evolving aspect of technology, what that's robbed us of, right? Like it's incredible what that's done to us as human race. And then AI is coming, or it's already here. So who knows what that's going to be. But I think you see that in Westport and other towns, there's this initiative called Okay to Wait. So I think that you're right on target, and that etiquette and communication skills and really what it means to be a human is needed for kids and teens. But also I think adults have lost the art of communication in a way that's loving, caring, and considerate.
Yes.
And I think it's because our world is so stressful.
So stressful. Yeah, I mean, I find social media to create enormous anxiety for me. And I witness it in my daughter. She is constantly pulled away from what she needs to be doing or wants to be doing with TikTok or with Snapchat or with Instagram. And what happens is, it's really a brain chemistry. When we're on social media and we're on technology, we release enormous levels of dopamine, right? So we get this quick hit of joy, but it depletes our brains of that chemical. And so if you do it first thing in the morning, throughout the rest of the day, you're not getting that same level of excitement. And this, quite frankly, is what also has contributed to the sort of downfall of television, because Gen Z, they don't have an attention span.
Unless it's Grey's Anatomy and Lost and
Exactly.
And Friends.
Exactly.
Because for some reason, every generation will find
Their
those shows
thing.
and they will watch it in their bedroom on their computer, not on a TV.
Of course, she's on her laptop with Netflix in bed.
Right.
But even that, it's like,
Well, they have to be on the phone while they're watching Netflix.
Of course.
It's the multitasking.
Wait, here's the craziest thing. Speaking of being on the phone, I used to come home from work, and my daughter would be on the couch with her, doing her homework, and I would start talking. I'd be like, hey, and she's like, shh. I'm like, why? She's like, I'm on the phone. I'm like, what do you mean you're on the phone? She's like, I'm on FaceTime doing homework with my friend.
Yeah. Yes.
But you're not even talking or doing the same work.
Right, because that, like, for them, that remember, like, when we were, like, we'd go do remember we'd do homework with friends, or, like, that was, like, it's like their play date. It's the FaceTiming.
Yeah, but, like, we would go do homework and sit and
read
and put on a cassette tape and have a book and, like, kind of talk about it. But they're not even looking at each other.
Know,
it's just like having company, and that's the sad and scary thing. Yeah, and people say social media is so great. It's a network. It's not. No. Actually, it's very isolating. And like you said, it's not only teens, but we as adults, if it almost makes it too easy to not go out and socialize, because you can catch up and see what your friends are doing and acquaintances and people you haven't. And it makes you feel connected, but it's like, it's a false sense of connection.
It's a false sense of connection. And then I would love for you to talk about what you're really seeing. Is your main focus right now teens, or is it everybody?
I have two sort of very different clients. I see a lot of women who are going through many of the things that I've gone through. Divorce, finding love again in your late 40s, career pivots, women who are struggling with enormous anxiety and overwhelm. And, these are all things that I struggled with throughout my life. And I mean, really still do. These are things that I'm constantly working on and growing and learning about. So I've got that sort of segment of clients who I love, and I love working with women. And then I have a bunch of teenagers and young adults and their parents. So I work with teens, but I feel like it's essential. It's essential to work with the parents of those teens, because change cannot happen unless the parents are willing to look at themselves and make changes. Because we are all responsible for the relationships that we're in. We have to take ownership, right? If my teen is behaving a certain way, well, I've got to look at myself as their parent and say, what's happening here? what's the root cause of what is causing the lack of motivation, the the alcohol, the drugs, the social issues, right? The disrespect. So I don't blame parents. I mean, there are a lot of other things that we need to look at: society, social media, all of the influence of friends. But if parents can't take responsibility and look at themselves in the way they're parenting, it's really difficult to make change. And teens also have to be willing to look at themselves. But it's got to start with the parent.
The women aspect, I do think is a great niche for you, because you were married and for a long time raised a beautiful daughter, and then got divorced and found love again. But I thought that was always very aspirational and inspirational, and so I'm not surprised that you have a lot of women coming to you. And with the divorce rate the way it is, and with social media and the world the way it is, I think it's hard to find love.
Listen, it is hard to find love, especially now because of these apps, where people, again, it's not, years ago, you'd have to go out, you'd have to be introduced, you'd meet people face to face. When you're sort of swiping, you don't know anything about these people. And it's also difficult because you feel a lot of rejection, right? Like if you swipe and you don't get the what is it, like the response or the connection, you're just like, what was it about me,
Right.
So it's also discouraging, and it prevents people from wanting to do it. And they're like, oh, I'm done. I'm done. I've had a few bad dates and I'm finished. But I will say, for me, firstly, I want to touch on, it's not easy to get a divorce, right? It's very difficult. There are a lot of things that you have to consider. Finances, children, that can be really hard. And of course, people don't want to be alone. I think, generally speaking, I'm not talking about everybody, and there's nothing wrong with people saying, I'm good alone, but I think humans are here to connect. It's an innate thing. We are here to connect with other humans. We need that to survive and to thrive. So for me, getting a divorce was really scary. I married my high school sweetheart. I never dated. I didn't want to date. I loved him so much, but I decided that, we had been through therapy and all kinds of things, and I was terrified of divorce. But when I got to a place in my life where I said, I'm very lonely in this marriage, and I knew I would be ready to move on when I felt that the idea of spending the rest of my life with this person was scarier than being alone for the rest of my life. And that's when I knew. And he's a very good man, and he's a wonderful father, but he just wasn't a great partner. So getting a divorce and having never dated in my life, I mean, you knew me in college. My boyfriend went to school an hour from me. I was always taking a Peter Pan bus every weekend to go see him. I had no experience dating, and I didn't even know where to start. It was scary, and again, it took me a little while, and I was set up on a few dates, and I would do the apps, and I would go out, and it just wasn't fun for me. And then I met my now soon-to-be husband, who, that's a whole other story, but let me just say that I knew in my heart, and I always knew, that this kind of love existed. Yeah. And I did not have that. I did not have that in my first marriage. And I knew, the one thing I said I know I deserve in this life is a good partner, because I am a good partner. And it was a real wake up for me to be able to recognize that it's not my job to make everyone else happy. It's my job to make myself happy first. And of course that came around 40, right? It takes a little while. But I met this fantastic, amazing guy, and it was the first time in my life where I felt understood and valued and seen, really seen. And I felt like a we. It didn't feel like it was just all on me. I always felt like, in Rockefeller Center, Atlas with the world, that's how I felt. Everything was on me. And I was able to share with him. And, listen, we have a beautiful relationship. Nothing is perfect, right? But for me, I feel supported for the first time in my life. And that's such a beautiful thing. And we have a great dynamic where we do understand each other. We understand our triggers. We understand the things that make each other happy. And it's the little things. Showing gratitude goes such a long way. Tell the person that you appreciate what they did, right? We are a team. We're not against each other. We don't always agree, but we're a team. And so what I would say for women who are out there, and a lot of the women that I coach who are feeling defeated, or how am I going to, or there's no great guys out there, right? I say, you have to value yourself first. You have to recognize yourself. You have to recognize your value. You have to recognize what you have to offer somebody. And also, be true to yourself. Don't change who you are to make someone else happy. We as women tend to feel like, oh, it's our job to take care of this person. It's our job to, make sure that they're happy. No, it's your job to make sure that you're happy. Because when you're happy and you're whole, and you really are able to be self-aware, and also know your triggers, right? Because when you know your triggers, if you're able to communicate that with someone, then you feel safe. If you can communicate those triggers and you're able to be vulnerable and show your vulnerability, that's the person for you. The person who doesn't make you feel shame, who doesn't sort of make fun of you, judge you for your feelings. The one who allows you to just be. They love you for who you are. And I think that was the difference for me. And it took me, between my divorce and meeting this person, it's probably a good 6-7 years. But that was the time where I was able to look inward and really learn about myself and learn to appreciate myself, and also to reparent myself. I was parenting alone, and when I was parenting Eliza, I couldn't give her what I never got. And so I had to be kind to myself, to nurture myself. There was no one else to take care of me, right? So I needed to give myself the things that I never got in my marriage, never got in my childhood. And through that, I recognized what I needed. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice those needs or to compromise those needs. And so only when I really became self-aware, that's when I met this man.
I think to wrap up the interview, what if you were to tell parents 3 key things that you're seeing themes that are happening within this generation of Gen Z, what would they be?
Well, I would say number 1, our kids are suffering with a lack of confidence. It's, I think for teenagers, it's very normal. Of course, life experience brings confidence. Doing things that scare you brings confidence. And our kids are hiding. They're hiding behind technology. And when you're not out there and you're not learning how to manage things on your own, how many times do our kids call us and, say, Mom, what should I do? How should I handle this? Or, it's like they can Google something. they don't have to be resourceful.
Yeah, they can ask AI.
Exactly.
Write me this paper.
Exactly.
Find this out for me. How do I behave?
Yes.
And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. 'Cause technology is basically giving us all the answers.
100%. And it's really destroying our future because our children are not developing the resources. They're not resourceful.
No.
You can find an answer to anything.
Could you imagine putting that generation and what we went through? Like, just imagine just a day of what we went through, of just even going to work in the city in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and like navigating the 80s growing up. Not like pat on the back, it's just more of that we grew up in a very different world. So
Yes.
this generation is, and I think that's why like your new venture of, like, I've always thought you were an incredible communicator and also had like a unique people skill, and really like across the board, it's like, oh, I love Nikki, you have to meet Nikki. So I think like that is, and I think, and I've told you this before, I said, that is your hook. It's like, that's what you can share. And I think you're right. Like, I can imagine you as a producer, and we have worked together, but you wanting to fix things and wanting for people to see all the things they could be. So I think like one of the things that we're finding out on this podcast is not only the incredible people we talk to, but there is a theme that I'm sensing on our third day here. And it's like, you guys are like light workers.
Oh.
There's a light worker commonality or theme going through the guests. And you guys all are you've become wise. And it's not the age, it's like, we've been through a lot.
Yes.
Like collectively as a generation, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do say that experience is the greatest teacher. It really is. You know, what we learn from the hardships that we go through.
That shapes us.
Absolutely. That's what shapes us. And those are the greatest lessons. And that's something that I tell these kids and their parents. Stop rescuing. Stop fixing. Don't save your child. You're doing them a disservice. And it's so hard because you don't want to see your child suffer.
Well, I think it's because as a generation, we were never saved.
It's so true.
They were like, you're good.
You're fine. But you can figure it out. Think about it. We'd ride bikes, right, until it got dark out.
No helmets.
No helmets. And like, if you didn't have a dime or a quarter, you couldn't call your parents. So it'd be like,
hope it works out.
How do I figure this out? I don't know what to do, right? Like I have a flat tire. Oh shit. Like I have to go to a gas station and I have to find a... But these are things, I mean, literally that we did at 8 years old. But parents have to connect with their kids in order to give them the tools and the skills to thrive in life. You don't want to raise a child who's going to live with you until they're 30. And 30% of millennials lived at home until they're 30. So they don't have the life skills, and these are the millennials. Now, you can imagine Gen Z is even worse. So this is why I say the parents, it starts with the parents. And while it's so hard to see your child struggle and suffer, you know, I would always say to my daughter, I love you. It is not my job to be your friend, and you don't have to like me. You do not have to like me, but I will always do right by you. I will always make decisions that I know are in your best interest. Even though you don't feel it is in your best interest today, it is in your best interest tomorrow. And you will look back one day and you will understand. And I got that from my parents, right? So all the things when my dad would make me pick up the phone at 11 years old and figure something out, you know, it helped me. But back to just real quickly, the three things that I would say. Confidence is a big issue with our kids, and that again starts with parenting. Social anxiety, again, goes back to technology, right? Kids don't know how to interact, so I work on skills, how to connect, push yourself out of your comfort zone, how to communicate, start conversations, and again, social media, comparisons. Kids struggle with their appearance. I have even boys, a lot of the boys that I talk to, they want facial surgery. They don't like the way they look. The girls, primarily on their bodies. They're looking at these idealized images that are not true. They're not accurate, right? The people that they're seeing on social media, they're not the norm.
So Nikki, I loved having you. Thank you for being here. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
You can find me on my website at nikkitaub.com. You can also find me on social, Instagram, Coach Nikki Taub, TikTok, Coach Nikki Taub.